Good morning. I am Steve Weber. Welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show. Took a couple days where I didn't broadcast Monday and Tuesday. And so here it is Wednesday, my first day broadcasting this week. So today is show number 195, and it's June 30th, 2021. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do a slightly different format, kind of similar, but there's a twist to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a short monologue, a little bit shorter than what I would normally do. And then I'm going to bring on our guest, Shannie Alvarez. She has been a guest here several times, so she's coming back. But this time, she's going to we're going to have a little more of a conversation, and she's going to almost interview me. And I've got the topic of what I'm going to call strong suits. And so I'll introduce that in the monologue, and then we'll dig into it. And there's a story, the roller skating rink story, that I'll probably share, and we'll just let it go back and forth. And the impetus and the way this idea started was after probably the last show that we did together a few weeks ago. We talked off the air for a minute or two, and we both had kind of shared that. She had, I think, shared on the air that she's had these relationship patterns that kind of repeated throughout her life, and maybe she shared that to me privately, or maybe she publicly did. I can't remember for sure. But at any rate, I ended up, I said, hey, I've kind of went through that same experience. And so, I discovered several years ago why relationships had the same kind of pattern and result over and over and over and over again. And then when I finally figured that out, of course, the opportunity to change that became something. It was an opportunity. And while I was in this kind of blind spot pattern, it never came to be. So anyway, that's how this whole story began. And I told her about it, and I said, hey, it would be actually helpful if we just had the conversation and I could share that story. And so that's what today's show is going to be all about. All righty. So before I get into the monologue, let me just tell you that tomorrow, Tara Crete will be joining us. And Tara is a yoga teacher and a life coach, and she helps women primarily create a life that they truly desire. Create a life that you truly desire, which sounds a lot like live your life with Gumption. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot in common. I know we also have in common the path less traveled. So she has been someone who has decided to take the path less traveled, as I have too. All righty. And then Friday, I'm planning to do a show, but I don't have a guest scheduled. So we'll see what happens on Friday. On Sunday, the 4th of July, I'm not doing a show, but I'm going to be the interviewee. I'm going to be a guest on Della's Voice Sunday Live Talk Show. Della Fatuhi, and Della was a guest on this show right around at the beginning of the year. And so anyway, she's invited me on, and we're going to talk about living your life with Gumption. And that's on 12 noon. And I'll have links on my Facebook personal page for that, probably also on the American Gumption page. So you should be able to find that. If on the 4th of July, you want to, hear another, you want to hear me talk some more. All righty. And then next week on Tuesday, Serenity Sam, she's been a guest here also a few times before. Haven't had her on for a few months. She's been doing painting, like oil painting, brush, canvas type stuff. And she's gotten really good. I mean, she started out like just a couple months ago. And so anyway, she's going to tell us how that whole process, and we got some examples of what she's been doing, how that process has creatively opened her up, not just in the artistic sense of painting, but also as far as her music and, her own journey of personal development. And then on Wednesday next week, Peter Panagore will join us. He is the author of Heaven is Beautiful. Peter's book is about a near-death experience that he had. Actually, it was a death experience, but then he came back into this 3D world that we live, and fascinating book. And I got a chance to hear Peter speak, got his book, read it, and now he's going to be a guest next Wednesday. And Heaven is Beautiful is the name of that, Peter Panagore. Pangori, I'm not sure how you say it. Panagore, I believe. All right. So that is it. Let's just roll right into this. And as I said that today I'm going to do the Strong Suits monologue. And this is going to be a short little, just kind of an intro. And then I'm going to bring Shannie on and we will dive in more deeply with it. So just think of this as just a quick overview. So back in 2009, I attended a weekend seminar, which turned into a whole year worth of seminars that I participated in. It became my year of awakening or my year of transformation. Now I'm calling it my first year of awakening because every year's been an awakening ever since then. But anyway, one of the ideas, it was like a 3-day thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you go back on a Tuesday night, finish up. But anyway, they go through these different modules and different ideas and teachings. And one of them was called the Strong Suits. And so anyway, back in 2009, when the very first weekend, when I was introduced to this idea, I really began thinking about like, okay, well, what is this idea? And really became much more aware. And really it was the awakening. It was literally the awakening when I went, oh my gosh, I have the ability to be conscious, and I don't have to operate in my subconscious programs that are running in the background, unaware to me. And so anyway, that was the whole thing. But Strong Suits is what we're going to focus on. That's the one out of the 5 or 6 or 7 modules that they talk about over the multiple days. That's the one that was like the trigger for me. And it actually didn't trigger me completely opening up for a few years later, but it was started in 2009, and then at the end of 2013, I re-attended that seminar and went through the whole process again, and that's when it all kind of clicked together. But that foundational work that I had done 4 years earlier, and then really the next couple of years in thinking about it, the pieces were all there to kind of awaken. So I was a little bit of a slow learner in terms of waking up. It took me several years to fully get it. All right. So the other thing, though, that happened during that time frame was that I started looking at all of the beliefs that I had ever since, from childhood, the things that you're taught by parents, by teachers, by, the community that you live in, you're in a church, all those things that you get programmed as a youngster. And so then you start looking at those things. That was probably why it took so long, 4 years, for me to finally oh my gosh, I get it now. But all along you're getting it, but you start to look at every single belief that you have, and that's like a can of worms, and you can't just like open up one little belief, because they're all related to each other and they build on each other and they're stacked together. And so anyway, to go through that process took me, as I said, several years. And the key thing that I would like to just say at this point is that if you're unaware, if you're not like paying attention to those beliefs and understanding, what you're doing, they become essentially like blind spots. You just don't even know they're occurring in it. And that was what was the Strong Suits was essentially a blind spots that I had, because I was operating and being a certain way, living my life kind of on an autopilot way. And then once you become aware of it, you go, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was doing that. And then that allowed me to go into kind of what I'll call self-forgiveness, where you don't continue to say things like, you stupid idiot. You don't say that out loud. You say that to yourself quietly, but like in a loud, nasty voice. Dude, dummy, don't do that. You're trying to almost like force yourself not to do that. And yet you don't know you're even doing it, because these are like kind of blind spots. So once I became aware of some of these things, then, I was able to go, oh, well, hey, I didn't even know I was doing it. So that's where you can become a lot more self-forgiving. All right. So Strong Suits are our way of being, and they produce the success that we have in our life, and they are a good thing. Strong Suits are a very good thing. And you have success in your life by operating in these 3 different ways. And this is the theory that I learned and basically accept. And so, you produce success in your life 60% of the time, 75% 70% of the time, whatever, it's like, let's just say half or more than half the time you have success. And so, just by being these three ways, you're succeeding 50, 60, 70% of the time. That's a good thing. But it also means that you're not succeeding 30, 40, 50% of the time. And then that's when you're frustrated, annoyed, angry. And so the key thing that I learned was that anytime you're frustrated, angry, annoyed, you're trying to be, or at least they asked me to consider that I was trying to be a certain way, one of those three strong suits, and it wasn't working. And so, but because I was running the program, because it was a kind of that subconscious activity, you just didn't know. And so you're frustrated because it's not working. It works most of the time, works more than half the time, but it doesn't work 100% of the time. And so anytime I got like a consciousness about anytime I was annoyed or frustrated, I went like, okay, how am I being right at the moment? Am I trying to force like one of my strong suits? And it's not working, and that's why I'm frustrated. And we have the ability to behave more than these three ways, right? But these are three ways operate on that subconscious level without us knowing about it. So we're just doing it. We're just that's what it's called, a strong suit. It's just like something that's like programmed into our way of being. And so anyway, that's so now here's the key thing. Each of these strong suits develop at one of three different times in your life. Either you're a child, you're a young, like a preteen, or you're a young adult. And we'll talk more about that with Shannie. But they develop, and then you are, using these things. But there's always a trauma story that triggers this decision that you make to be this certain way and to behave in this certain way, which then, it becomes a good thing, right? It becomes a good thing. Now, here's the thing. You want to, again, be aware that you're doing it and not just let it run the program so that you're not having success 30 or 40 or 50% of the time, but you're having success, 70, 80, 90, 100% of the time, because you have the choice of being whatever way is necessary for any given situation. And then that's really what consciousness really becomes, right? You're always behaving in a way that is conscious. Is like you're aware of how you're behaving at all times. So I think I'm just going to leave it right there, and I'm going to ask Shannie to come and join us. All righty. Hello there, Shannie Alvarez. Welcome back. Welcome
Hello.
back to the show. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you, Steve?
Very good. I'm excited for this, and I appreciate you're helping me. You've been a guest on the show a few times, and then, like I said, we kind of talked about this a little bit. Not so much in the detail of it, but yeah. we threw out the idea, and you graciously agreed to come on and just let me kind of question, like, how does this work? And so I've shared some of the things I've written about this in the past, and how's that all sound? Is that okay?
Oh yeah. I thought that your story of the roller ring story was adorable, and how you explained it and how you wrote about it. I thought that was really cute. Yeah. So these experiences, they shape us, don't they? And we grow and we learn from these things.
Yeah, they certainly do. We have choice in how we want to. We believe we have choice in how we want to behave and be, except that we are running these programs like that we have decided from when we were either a child, like a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, or we are a preteen, and we make a decision, and then we just sort of like automatically do that. And these decisions that we make are good, because these, like, they're called strong suits. They're like ways of being, and there's three of them. There they are. There's three of them, and so they develop, like I said, as a child, and then as a kind of a preteen, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range, and then the third one is like when you're a young adult, like maybe going off to college age, that type of thing. And so anyway, what I learned from it was that so it was landmark education that I was learning all this from and using it, and it was a great program in terms for me. It helped me, awaken to all this. And so this idea and this teaching was their idea. So I'll give them full credit for the fact that I learned from it and grateful. But these strong suits, they run in the background. You don't even know you're doing it. And so, and so what happens is you're like kind of on autopilot. And so you just like, ultimately you have three of them that develop right at those three different times in life. And no matter what situation you're in, you try like option one or option two or option three, and you're not consciously going through this process, but you're like, you're just doing it. And more often than not, it works for you, right? You have some level of success, and their theory was that all of your success comes from, these choices, and then all of your miseries and failures and frustrations and annoyances and anger, comes when you're trying to be one of those three ways, but it's not working. And so if you become aware of them, then you can go, oh, well, maybe I want to be a different way, maybe, and so we could talk about each of the three ways, and then we'll get into the specific roller skating rink story, because that was for me the big one, and that was my second strong suit. So anyway, to try and understand, I really like how you're putting it together, that we subconsciously, some of these experiences that we've had in life that really sort of impacted a certain situation, whatever, in our earlier stages of growing, and how we dealt with that and how that situation affected us, you're saying is just constantly coming up in the future, and we can actually be aware of it, and decide how we want to choose to deal with it based on how we struggled with it already once in our life before, and how we kind of overcame with that struggle before. Now we can use that strength and apply it to all of these certain situations that are kind of mimic those difficult situations that we were in the first time that we dealt with it. We can now use that tool to be able to overcome other situations. And I guess what you're saying is we're not typically aware that we're actually doing this when we are coming and confronting a sort of a conflict situation, I guess is what you're saying, right? This is what I'm trying to understand, your angle on this, and now you're making me aware of it as well, that, oh, this is how this is what I do. This is how I basically troubleshoot these conflicts in my life. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, but it's even bigger than that. It's like every situation that you go in. And so every scenario that we go in, we have to behave a certain way. And so it doesn't have to necessarily evolve into a conflict situation. It just is just like a human interaction. It's like two people or a group of people interacting. And so maybe what we should do is we should talk about the three strong suits in terms of like when they develop and what my particular strong suit was, because then that'll give you maybe a better idea for it. Because what happens is when you're a child, strong suit number one develops, and then then you only have one strong suit. But then as you're like a preteen, you kind of get to the point where you go, oh my gosh, something happens and you go, oh my gosh, I need another way of being. So then you develop strong suit number two. And then number three develops when you're a young adult. And because for the same reason, because 2 strong suits weren't enough, and then you develop it. Now, I asked the question, well, why don't you have a 4th and a 5th and a 6th like later in life? And they're like, well, it doesn't work that way. It's just, it becomes like, like 3 is kind of the, the way it works, because they're the formative years, and then you just keep repeating those. So once you have those, you try to use one of those 3 ways of being each and every time for every situation. And they work a lot of the time, right? Say it works 50% of the time, or 60% of the time, or 70% of the time. Well, that's working. And they're called strong suits because they're good. They're good things to have these. The problem is that they don't work 100% of the time. And every time that you're frustrated or annoyed or angry or having a situation where it's not working, you don't even know what you're doing and why it's not working, because you're unaware. You're unaware of that way of being. I'm talking theoretically about it. So let's go through strong suit number 1 first, and then I'll tell you, what my particular way is, and then that'll maybe make more sense. And then we'll go through number 2 and number 3, and then hopefully we'll have time to tell the roller skating rink story.
Okay, sorry, because I think maybe I'm kind of, I'm just really trying to understand this
Sure.
theory that you're saying, which is making sense to me, because why was I so dysfunctional, up until about even at 25? But I think I was starting to get a grasp on these strong suits, because how I had repeatedly dealt with these situations that kept on appearing in my life was not in a healthy way. It wasn't until I developed a healthy way to deal with it, to have a strong suit that was healthy, that I was able to apply that healthy way over and over and over again for future situations, and be confident. Okay, now I can feel confident in every situation that I'm in. I know how to be healthy, like deal with it in a healthy way. Okay, sorry. I think this is what I'm identifying with what you're saying.
Yeah. So let me just say, like, make one little distinction on what you just said. You developed, and this is their theory. This isn't my theory, but I bought into it, and this is what I'm sharing with you today. You developed a strong suit as a child, like at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, somewhere in that time frame, and it was a result of some kind of a trauma in your life. And usually the trauma is around, you say to yourself, I'm not smart enough. And look, have you ever seen little kids playing? They are totally unaware. They have no self-consciousness, right? They're just like happy little people. So something happens to them that they go, oh my gosh, and they start to become conscious, and they start to like awaken, and they go, oh my, like, and it could be as simple as somebody like an older sibling saying you're stupid, or the parent saying, don't do that. And it might not be like anything like you're doing super bad. And it's not like your parents are like completely freaking out on you. It's just like you suddenly trigger like the thought of, oh my gosh, I'm not behaving the way they want me to behave. And so then you develop that way of being, that what they call in first strong suit. And so, so rather than making it theoretical, I'll just share mine. In my case, and usually it's around something about not being smart enough. At least that's the hints that they gave you during this weekend seminar that, like I said, that I participated in. And so in my case, I had an older brother and sister, 5 and 7 years older than me. So then I came along, and my mother, I remember this. She said, "Oh, your brother and sister are smart." And so here they were, like 5 and 7 years older than me, and say I'm 4 or 5, right? So they're like, they're like 11 and 9. And they're smart. I'm being told that they're smart. And I'm like, man, I can't compete on smartness. I'll never catch up, right? I'm only 4 or 5, and they're already like, 10 or 11 and 9. And how am I going to ever catch up? So in my case, I said, I'm not going to compete on being smart with them. I'm going to be social. And so that's my strong suit number 1, is I'm social, and charming is the kind of subcategory of it for me. So this is my strategy, and this is why I'm good at doing this particular show and why I was great at being Forrest Gump, because I loved sitting on the bench talking to people. And so social is a very, very good thing, to be, right? So I would try throughout my life to be social, but sometimes I would notice that I'm coming on way too strong for other people. And they're like, like if they're kind of an introverted person and I'm doing my social act, they're like, whoa, back off, dude. And I remember many times, and certainly when I was performing in my Gump days, like I was like pumped up, and like I had the social thing dialed up at full volume, and it like freaked people out. So once I learned all of this, became aware of it, then I was like, oh, I gotta, and instinctively you knew, you learned over time that you had to dial that back. But social's a very good thing. The hidden story was the fact that I had made a decision that I couldn't compete on being smart. And so I decided I would be social. So that's how my particular strong suit. But strong suit could be anything else. You could be like a peacemaker. You could be the one who's an appeaser. You could be the, the person who is helpful. Whatever that way of being is kind of that's your strong suit. And so it took me, you had to think about it. You had to kind of pay attention to how you were being, right? How you behaving in your life to come to realize it. And once you realize like how what it is, then you can go, well, when did it develop? Did it develop when I was a child, or did it develop when I was a teenager, or did it develop when I was a young adult? And then what was the trauma story behind it? Because the trauma story is kind of like the elephant in the room that you're unaware of. And that's so you always have this fearful thing. So in my particular case, I would be always fearful that I'm not able to compete on being smart so I gotta charm people. I gotta be social. I gotta be friendly. And that's my way of getting along with them. So that was number one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that does. You're making me think about, okay, well, what's my strong suits then?
Right. So strong suit is very, very good. The bad part is that there's that underlying trauma thing where you're like, gee, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough.
There was something that brought that strong suit out in you. Yeah.
And they call it a trauma event. And the trauma event, again, isn't like an automobile accident or the death of a parent. It could be all that kind of stuff, but it's usually like just some innocuous kind of thing that like, your parents just say something, or, for number one, it's usually at the home because you're only a kid, right? You're not out there. So then number two, strong suit develops when you're probably more like a school age kid, right? You're out being with other kids and that sort of thing. And so for me, I was 11 years old, and it was the roller skating rink story. And I won't go into the whole story right now, other than to say that, I was attempting to be social, right? And then I had this situation occur that social didn't work. I didn't understand what was going on. And so then that kind of triggered my second strong suit, which became independent. And you don't like, you're 11 years old. It's not like you're writing down like a list of like a T-squared kind of thing on a piece of paper of pros and cons and making an analytical decision. You just kind of make the choice that, okay, I'm going to be. And so in my case, I said, I'm going to be independent. I don't need anybody else. I don't need you. I'll be just on my own. And so I became independent. Now, independent is nothing wrong with independent. In fact, I moved to California when I was 22. I moved to Montana alone when I was 20 or 49. So I've been like this independent. I sat on the bench for 15 years, essentially by myself, talking to people. I couldn't do that job if I wasn't independent, if I didn't have enough, self-confidence and belief in my own abilities. But the problem is that I missed out on the relationships. And this is what we talked about, in your particular case, similar to mine. We've had these patterns of relationships that would fail over time, over years and years, right? And you're like, you were unaware of it. And well, think about how good is being independent work in a relationship. you know, and specifically, I had made the decision that I wasn't going to talk about the incident that occurred. And again, we can talk about that story in a minute. But I said, I'm not going to talk about it. And so I'll just be independent. And so it became a secret. It was a 40-year secret. When I finally cracked that nut, and this was really the big one for me, I mean, I was overcome with emotion. I had like, oh my gosh, I literally said, oh my gosh, it's been me. It's not been them.
Mm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So that was like, that's where I knew that it was like a kind of an eye-opening, awakening moment where it was like, it's like, I mean, literally I was like, oh my gosh, it's been my fault. It wasn't their fault. You know, I'd been blaming them all these years. And, you know, there was like a bit of grieving that had to go on, and forgiveness. I talked about self-forgiveness, right? And you go, well, wait a minute. I didn't even know I was being this way. I wasn't doing it on purpose to be mean. I was behaving like an 11-year-old kid. I was stuck being an 11-year-old kid in terms of how to, you know, and independent was the answer for me. And again, we can get into the story and it'll make more sense. So, but that's number 2 in terms of how I became independent. Question or?
No, like I think that, you know, once you tell us the story of, you know, what made you social and independent, and then the next one, that'll help me get a better sense of, you know, of these superpowers in your life and how you use them in a good way.
I love that. Superpowers. They are superpowers, right? Social is a superpower. Independent is a superpower that I have, right?
Yeah.
So they're not bad. The bad part is that there's an underlying story that you're not aware of, that you're fearful of each and every time that situation happens. And so you revert back to being like a 4-year-old child or an 11-year-old boy or a 22-year-old young man, and you're in fear, but you're not even aware of it, right? It's just operating in that background program. So subconscious level. So the third one for me was I had moved to California. I was only there for about a year, and I had a job with a company. And let me just since I'm not going to tell the whole story today, let me just tell a little bit of the backstory. Right out of high school, I went and worked with my father, and you know, I didn't go to college. And so I thought, I'm just going to, because I was already independent. I'm like, well, everybody else is going to college. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go to work. So I did that, and I was working with my father, and it was a trade, and I was learning from him. So for the first 2 years, I was a total sponge in terms of learning. But then by year 3 and 4, I was wanting to become more independent. And so I started saying to my father, hey, let's try something this way. Can we do this? Because he was the guy kind of running this crew of workers, and of which I was one of them. And so it was kind of a perfect scenario that I was in. Very grateful. Because what would happen is my father would always say, yeah, let's try it. And I could come up with like a crazy idea, and he would always let me kind of run with it. Maybe not 100% of the time, but more often than not. And so what would happen is one of two things. Either I would fail at doing it the way I wanted to do it, or I would succeed. Now, if I failed, he would just go, okay, here's how we're going to fix it. And then he would calmly explain what I needed to do. And I would be like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work, you know? And so, so I didn't get in trouble. I didn't get reprimanded. I just had this kind of learning experience. And if it succeeded, he was like, oh my gosh, that's great. You know, I never even thought of that. And so I became kind of like this, I became very confident and very aggressive in my own creativity. And I was allowed to, because I could never fail and get in trouble. I could only fail and have to fix it, but he was there to fix it for me. So now I'm out in California, and I'm working with this company for less than a year. And they were a group of scientists and they had all this equipment that they wanted put together so they could do this like kind of research work. They had a laboratory, and I had the ability to build things. And I had been trained by my father to be aggressive and creative in, putting things together. And so there was one guy who like kind of was like he knew what he wanted, and he would explain to me what he wanted and what the goal was. And then I had to sort of just figure it out for myself, and I was able to kind of run with it and do whatever I wanted. So I did that. And within like a year, I put together a whole bunch of stuff for them, and they were very happy with, the fact that I was doing this. So I get called into their office one day, to my boss's office one day, and I'm thinking he's going to tell me that I'm the greatest guy in the world and I'm doing a super job and blah, blah, blah. And he did actually say all those things. But he also said that I was behaving in a way that wasn't helpful to my career. And I was behaving as if I was more self-important than everybody else. And he said that I was suffering from delusions of grandeur. I didn't even know what that meant. I had to go home and look it up. And I was devastated because I just was like being creative and being like, I was behaving the way it was okay to behave under the protective wing of my father, but it wasn't necessarily appropriate for, this work environment. It's like people don't want to hear it. They just want me to do my job and, stay in my lane in terms of like, hey, you go put this stuff together, but don't bother us otherwise. And so anyway, I was devastated by being told that I was suffering from delusions of grandeur. And so the strategy that I came up with, because social or independent wasn't working in that particular case, right? So I needed a third strategy. Social was good because I was able to communicate with these guys. Independent was good because I was able to just work on my own and build all this stuff and put it together. But I decided that I needed a third strategy, or I decided that analytical was the third one. So I became analytical. And so I said, I'm going to cross all my T's and dot all my I's before I make a decision. And what happened was I stopped trusting my inner voice. I was like operating kind of like connected with spirit that first year, where I was like being just super creative and aggressive and going for it because, and then I was having success with it and this and that, but it was like, it was too strong, and they wanted to tone me down a bit. So anyway, so I kind of overreacted to what they said. Telling me I have suffering from delusions of grandeur wasn't probably the nicest thing they could have said.
No.
But I decided that I would cross all my T's and dot all my I's. And so I became conservative in my approach, right? I became analytical. I started thinking things through. And I remember within a couple of years, I took the Myers-Briggs test, and I had like, they have the thinking and the feeling category. And I ended up getting like a 23 on the thinking and a 1 on the feeling. So I completely shut down my feeling, abilities. Now, here's what's funny is that I had those abilities for the next couple of years, but I would just like connect with it, and I would feel, and then I'd go, okay, well, what do I think about it? And so I'd immediately, like I'd get a little glimmer of heart, right? And tell me what to do. And then I'd go, well, I don't trust that because I got in big trouble, right? I got to think this through. I got to be analytical. And then I'd immediately send it up to my head. And I'd like, and people over the years, people were like, yeah, you kind of overthink things. And I had heard that literally hundreds of times. Now, nothing wrong with analytical, because I wouldn't have figured all this out if I had not been analytical, and it allows me to explain things. But the breakthrough came like back in 2014. And first I had to go through the processing of the roller skating rink story, which we haven't really got into the details yet. And then the delusions of grandeur story. And I was telling this, and a friend of mine, I was telling her about it. And she said, you stop trusting your instincts. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. That's what it was. And so I stopped that delusions of grandeur. And then since then, I've been trying to get back to my instincts, right? To my feeling self, right? And what's the saying about the biggest distance we have to travel is the distance, the 15 inches from our head down to our heart, right? So I've been on that journey for the last, 10 years. And of course, it feels like I've made, huge progress with it. Again, totally blind to it. So now that my 3 strong suits are social, independent, and analytical, what would happen is no matter what happens in life, I would go, should I use social, or should I use independent, or should I use analytical for it? Again, happening on the subconscious level, me not making a decision about it, but me going, which one of these will work? And so I'll try social and charming, right? So I try to charm my way and talk my way out of it, or, get through it that way. Or I became analytical and I think about I describe the problem in some kind of a way. Or I'd be independent, where I just go off and do it on my own without. And so I had success in life, 50, 60, 70% of the time by using one of those 3 strategies to get by. And yet I didn't have success for 30%, 40%, 50% of the time, right? And I didn't know why, right? So you're frustrated, you're angry, you're annoyed because social's not working, analytical's not working, independent's not working. And I'm trying to force one of those 3 things, or all 3 of them in combination, And so it's like I had like a toolbox with 3 tools in it. And all I would do is take it and hammer, or poke it with the screwdriver, or hit it with the wrench. And if it didn't work, then I was out of tools. I didn't have any other tools. But sometimes you need to be compassionate. Sometimes you need to be kind. Sometimes you need to be generous. Sometimes you need to be, helpful. Sometimes you need to be a peacemaker. And so these are all skills that we can have, except that we don't automatically turn to those. We have to make a decision to turn to those other ones, because the first 3 are like the autopilot ones. And so you just try it and try it and try it. So anybody who, once you start noticing this, you can kind of see it in other people. Like whenever they're frustrated, they're attempting to, be a certain way, and it's not working. And they don't, but their toolbox is limited to 3 tools. And, it would be really nice if we had 10 tools in our toolbox, but to access tools 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you need to be, have an awareness of it. And so, I think that's it. Now ask a question or 2 or help me out. And
I like that theory. I like that, I can see how your analytical self has put that theory into, the way that you've basically analyzed your life and how you got to understand these 3 strong suits for yourself, and really so aware, analyzing what you're analyzing, you're very aware of,
right.
And then now you're very aware of every situation and how you even use all of these strong suits. And now I guess what you're trying to say too is just aware of what tool you're grabbing now, or what tool you need when you're in these in any kind of situation. You're just aware.
Every situation.
Yeah, you're aware of it. So that's really neat. Yeah, that's really neat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so that's kind of right. If you're not aware, what they did was they called it a blind spot. So in other words, it's like you're just trying to force it to happen. That work, you're trying to use the tool that works, or one of the three tools that works most of the time, but it doesn't work, or it works like half the time, or like a little bit more than half the time. So, all your success comes before you're aware. All your success came because, you had those three great tools to use. And those are good tools to use. But if you're unaware that you're using those tools, and you're unaware that you have other tools, then you're limited, right? So you're still going to be frustrated or annoyed or angry.
And maybe if you are frustrated, then maybe that's when you're actually seeking a new type of tool that you need in your toolbox, because the tools you have there are not the ones that you need. And then that's the blind spot, and that's where we have to seek and find the other tool. I like it.
Yeah. So what's funny, Shannie, and you already kind of did it, is as I was discovering this and like kind of sharing, I haven't told this story in a while in this much detail. But when I kind of discovered this back in 2014 timeframe, I mean, it wasn't like I shared it with everybody I talked to, but you have a group of friends and you talked about it, privately. This is the first time I'm really talking about it on the show, and in this type of detail. I've hinted at different pieces of it over the last year, but so and this was a surprise to me, as I told the story about it, people did exactly what you did. And they went, oh, it made me think about like, well, what are my, strong suits? And so I was like, I was surprised, because here I was like sharing, kind of this personal, and at the time, these were secrets, like the roller skating rink, a 40-year secret. The Delusions of Grandeur story, a 30-year secret. I mean, these were like, I was embarrassed to talk about them, because, what will people think of me? Right. So the ego, it's a way of, taming and getting control of the ego. And so the ego wants to protect and don't tell people about it. But so my ego, I'm telling people about it. And like people would go, I was thinking about that. And they would share something back about like their, one of their ideas that it triggered for them. And I was like, initially, the ego was saying, hey, wait a minute, this is about me. This isn't about you. But it isn't about me, of course. Now it's not, right? It's about helping others to awaken and to learn. And so we want to all share these stories. And that's what you're doing with your book, We Are One. And I have it written down there. Shannie is the author of We Are One, ShannieAlvarez.com. We talked about the book on at least one full show, and maybe on other shows, pieces of it. So so go ahead and visit her website. And
thank you. Thanks, Steve. So are you going to get into that roller? I really want to hear the story. I heard it already. I read it. I think people should go and see that post that you wrote, because it's so adorable and it's so well written. But let's hear the story.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that I wrote a 6-part blog post series back in, it was actually probably more like in 2016. So this all happened in like the initial awakening occurred at the very end of 2013, 2014, for the better part of the first 6 months of the year were like just processing that and like kind of coming out of the closet. It was like very raw. And so it wasn't until 2 years later that I, publicly wrote the story. So it was a 6-part blog post series that I'll have to put in the show notes. So the roller skating rink story. Yeah. You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm 11 years old. I go to the roller skating rink on Friday night, and it became like kind of like the thing to do. And it wasn't like when I was a 5th grader. I was in 6th grade. It wasn't like when I was a 5th grader I was going there. It just sort of all of a sudden like started, and I was like, hey, this is fun, and so it became like kind of the thing to do. And so I'm going there and doing this on every Friday night. And after, a X number of weeks or a few months or whatever, I don't even remember that. I go one time, I show up, and these girls come up to me and they said, "You're the boyfriend." And these girls were friends of this other girl who, was we'll call her a popular girl. And my theory on why she was popular was because at 11 years old, she had a figure as opposed to, the other girls. And so anyway, I became I was told by her friends that I'm the boyfriend. And I was like, well, what's that mean? And they're like, you got to ask her to skate during the couples skate. And so, I was like, oh my gosh, and so I got up the courage and I went and did that. And, and there's like 3 couple skates during the, couple of hours that you're there. And, the lights go down and the big disco ball has the lights spinning and sparkles and, you're holding hands and you're skating around. And so anyway, that happens. And then the next week comes and I show up and I ask her to, do the same thing. It was like silly that I was like the boyfriend because all I was doing was like asking her to skate during the couple skate. It wasn't even like we were talking. And so anyway, the 3rd week comes around and I show up and these girls, the same ones who announced that I was the boyfriend, they unceremoniously come running up to me and tell me that I'm not the boyfriend and that she's got a new boyfriend. And he's an older guy and he shaves and he had a beard or something and he was 13 and I was 11 and it just seemed like, and so anyway, I was devastated or at least, hurt. And, as I went through the analytical part of it years later, right? Analytical, I didn't know why I became the boyfriend and I didn't know why I unbecame the boyfriend. And so I was like, it was very confusing to me. And my mother picked myself and a couple of friends up. And so after she dropped them off and we were driving from the last friend's house to our house, I burst into tears and she says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." And she says, "Well, I think something's wrong." And I said, "No, I don't want to talk about it." And she's like, "Well, I think you should talk about it." And, there was this moment in time when I went, it probably would be a good idea to talk about it. But I said to her, maybe we can talk about it tomorrow. And she said, "Okay, that's great. Let's talk about it tomorrow." And so tomorrow came and I thought we would talk about it. Like there was a couple times I went and kind of like hung around thinking maybe now would be a good time to talk about it, but she never said anything about it. And I never said anything about it. And like one day went by and then another day went by and I never talked about it. And then as I looked at the relationships that I had with women over the years, I would be social. So they would start out great. We'd have, lots to talk about and fun and getting to know each other. And I would reach a certain point where I would start to feel vulnerable, right? Vulnerable in the heart. And I would pull back and they would always say, "What's the matter?" And I'd say, "Nothing. I don't want to talk about it." And I literally did that, dozens of times. And so, my way of dealing with it was I would just be independent and I'd say things like, "I don't need you." It wasn't like I said it like to them or even said it aloud to myself, but subconsciously I'm like, I don't need anybody else. I can just, it's like too scary. Matters of the heart are scary. And I didn't know why I became the boyfriend and I didn't know why I unbecame the boyfriend. And it was just way too confusing. Well, that's fine for an 11-year-old boy, but for, a 20-something-year-old young man or a 30-year-old something or a 40-year-old to continue those patterns, that was not healthy behavior. And so consequently, I would be social. I'd meet people. I'd, begin a relationship. And then at some point I'd put up a barrier.
Yeah.
And they would go, "What's the matter?" And I'd say, "Nothing. I don't want to talk about it." it was.
That's really interesting how you basically took that scenario and you just keep repeating it, or you see how it's repeated with all the other, or not all of them, but to quite a few other relationships before you actually recognized it.
Yeah, except it was all of them.
Oh, okay, then it was all of them.
I mean,
Yeah.
In some version of that,
Yeah.
it was essentially all of them.
Really. And yeah, and I know what kind of brought it up. I know we don't have much time, but yeah, this was our last conversation, where because I had said, I don't understand why all of my relationships that I've had, because I'm single too, I'm independent, and why every single relationship, even though they were a different person, they pretty much mimicked all of my relationships. They all ended, they all went through, like they all, it was the same sort of sequence over and over and over again until, and I said to you, I said, well, now I'm aware of it. Well, now I'm 50 years old and I'm finally aware of it, that I can actually stop that. But it took a long time for me to actually be aware of it.
Yeah, I was 50 years old when I, 51 when I dug into this and started to figure it out, and then 3 or 4 when I finally had the light bulb moment go off. Where I went, oh my gosh! I literally went, oh my gosh! It's been me all this time. It wasn't them.
Yeah.
And that was a shock to me when I realized that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's been me.
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of remorse about, and feeling of these were nice people who deserved, a better explanation. And then you get into a little bit of loathing and guilt, but that's where the self-forgiveness part came. It was like, well, look, it wasn't like I was purposely doing this. I was just running the program over and over and over and over and over again. So, I was unaware. It was a blind spot.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I really like that, idea. It's very good.
So anyway, hopefully it's been helpful to, for us to talk about it, because I know that as I shared this story, it kind of gives permission to others to go, well, what blinder have I been, what program have I been running that, has not been helpful. And again, it's your strong suit is a good thing. It's just, you need to be aware of it, and you need to use it at the appropriate time and place, but not try to use it all the time and not double down on it when it's not working.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's always a learning journey,
Yeah. Well, thank you for allowing me to share the story. I didn't know how to. I was happier to do this way than to just monologue it out and do it. So the fact that you and the fact that you have experienced kind of that similar thing, it made it a safer way for me to share about. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And this is who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be learning from each other. That's how we become bigger, healthier people, And I appreciate, what I've learned from you today, and seeing things from what you've learned, and you've shared that with me now, and I can now look at myself too, and sort of be like, okay, well, what are my strong suits? And how is that helping me with future decisions? So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we've already done several shows together. I guess there's probably, my guess is that we'll find something else to talk about somewhere else in the future. So thank you for joining me and joining us this morning. I appreciate it. So
thank you too, Steve. I think you're great.
All right. Well, we'll wrap up this, and so we'll see you. Any last thing? Why do just take 1 minute or 2 minutes or whatever, and just tell people, what they'll find when they go to your website.
Oh, okay. So, about my website. I call myself a Gentile with a Jewish heart. And my website's basically about unity, love, peace, And how I see our relationship with the world is Jews and Gentiles, and it's a love relationship like a man and a woman. And it's very deep. But all of my stuff is very, very encouraging. So please, go ahead, go on to my site, my book, We Are One. It's available for free. I can send you an e-copy. Just message me and I'd be happy to send you one.
All righty. Well, thank you, Shannie. We'll see you next time then.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
All righty. Well, thank you, Shannie, for joining us. That was great that you, that we had a chance to talk that through. And I'm glad to share that story. I've been wanting to share that story, but didn't quite know the right way to do it. So when Shannie and I talked a few weeks ago, I just went, hey, this would be fun for me and hopefully helpful for others. So hopefully you enjoyed that. All righty. Well, that's it. I'm going to have Tara Crete join us tomorrow. She is a yoga teacher and life coach, and she is helping women create a life that they could truly desire. Create the life you truly desire. So that'll be tomorrow. And then I'll just pitch that on Sunday, the 4th of July, I'm going to be on Della's Voice Sunday live talk show, and that's at 12 noon. I will be with Della Fatui, and the topic is Live Your Life with Gumption. So we'll have fun on this Sunday, and I'll have a link on that on my Facebook page. All righty. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.